intrinsic value. How does God view us? Did he just want us? Or did he need us? Or did he just want us? And we found that he wanted us. So he made an intentional, purposeful choice. We looked at Genesis 1. We looked at that this was God's focus. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. So God created man in his own image, and in the image of God he created a male and female. It talks about the human race, not men specifically, but the human race, something that affects all of us. We were made in the image of God. We looked at that, how often God talks about his image and that importance in who we are, in what we are, how we're different from other beings. Another aspect of this verse, let us make man. There's a pluralism in how God talks about this. A lot of activity in the early parts of Genesis are spoken of in this plural us, which really comes from this word Elohim. Hebrew has plural words that end in M. So we say a word becomes plural when we end it in S, right? You have one book, you have multiple books. So in Hebrew, they had an im on the end. So if you had one book, you'd have a book, and if you had a whole pile of book, you would have bookims or bookum, and that would be their grammatical way of adding on that kind of plural sense. We know this. Think about angels, and we just had Valentine's Day, right? And you say, that little picture of a what? Cherub, right? Well, what do you call a bunch of cherubs together? Cherubim. Well, you may remember that. And then you've also got biblical terms for angels like the seraph and the seraphim. Well, that's the singular and the plural. So there's a plural aspect here with Elohim. That's going to be important as we start taking apart some of these words. We've given them general meanings in the past. Okay, what does it mean to have a plural word around God? Sometimes this is used to describe him in a sense of Trinity. That's true, but there are more specific examples that we're going to look at. So we're going to start in the book of Job, which talks about the sons of God. The sons of God, this is an interesting place that we need to start in talking about the Elohim and who they are. And this is all going to branch together with the families of God. And ultimately, we're going to look one level up from the imagers as individuals to the family or the families of God. It's going to take us a while to get through this, but let's start in the book of Job right before Psalms, and we can start. Let's start in Job. Well, you know what? Let's start in Job 38 is really where we want to start. Not in the beginning, where we know we've got actions with the sons of God, but in the beginning of creation, we've got a verse in Job 38. In this section, the Lord is challenging Job with a series of, what do you know about this? What do you know about running the universe? What do you know about weather patterns? What do you know about anything? And it's from a position of all the things Job doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, in one of those areas, he talks about the foundations of the earth. Let's look at verse 4 is a good place to start running in. He says, where were you, little man, little Job, when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined the measurements? Do you know why it's the size it is? We can measure and say we know what the size of the earth is. Yes, we know about the earth's foundations. We can measure it specifically. Do we know why? So still there are things that we don't know today. Surely you know, or who stretched the line upon it? Another way of saying, who put the measuring line and said this was right? To what were its foundations fastened? How does it hang in space? With the physics of gravity holding it in place, could Job have understood those things in his mindset? Or who laid its cornerstone God's point is you don't know the majesty of this, and he ends it with this: when the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. All the Elohim shouted for joy. This isn't just God talking. This is a use that we can use and start looking at ways the Bible uses this word Elohim in order to describe a population of spiritual beings. Is really the vague way I kind of want to leave that word. It is a category that it would include angels, would include God, would include a lot of references to things that happen. God would be the unique. In fact, there are verses where it says El of the Elohim. Okay, he's El, he's God, he is the most prominent, he is the ruler. But there exists this category, this class called the Elohim. Well, let's look at what the Bible says these Elohim are up to in different ways. So we know here they were there at creation. What else do we know about them? Let's turn back a few chapters in the beginning of the book of Job. What else do these sons of God do? What else are they up to? In chapter 1, verse 6, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And in other verses, that's where they assembled together. And Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" And he says, "We're walking to and fro on the earth, going to and fro and walking back and forth on it." And they start talking about Job. And that really opens up the whole book of Job. Things that he says, look at Job. And who's looking at Job? The sons of God. The sons of God and Satan are there, grouped together in an assembly. Well, I'm going to use some verbiage to describe this group of this category of people, or category of entities together as an assembly. Sometimes it's referred to as a divine council. Well, we're going to see that term woven through. The Elohim, what are they up to? Now, in Job chapter 2, we also have indications that they meet again. We can turn the page, and it just says it again briefly. Verse 1, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves. This is meeting number 2 recorded. And Satan also came among them to present himself. Okay, and they have a little rerun there. They start talking about Job again. Well, he survived the first round of tribulation, but he'll cave on the second round. Well, let's not look too much further at the book of Job, but let's just take away these things happen. There's a meeting, and they're doing things. Well, in this case, we know we've got a meeting, and at least Satan attends, and he's accusing. So there's some activity going on there. We're going to turn to Psalms next and see what God says ultimately in Psalm 82. How did these Elohim appear? Let's look at some more verses talking about the Elohim. We're going to look at their ups and their downs. In Psalm 82, here's how it starts. God stands in the congregation of the mighty. I might also say the assembly of the mighty, the council of the mighty. He judges among the gods. Well, this is the Elohim. That's the word we're talking about. He judges among the Elohim. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Consider that. Defend the poor and fatherless, do justice to the afflicted and needy, deliver to the poor and needy, free them from the hand of the wicked. They do not know, nor do they understand. They walk about in darkness. That's these people that are oppressed. All the foundations of the earth are unstable. Something's wrong with the way things are laid out to be. I said, you are Elohim, and you are children of the Most High. But here comes their judgment. But you shall die like men and fall like one of the princes. Arise, O God, and judge the earth, for you shall inherit all nations. there are terms here that are really going to feather into our exploration. He's talking about God taking back the earth, God judging and inheriting all nations at the end. There's his goal. There's his goal. And along the way, there's a judgment against the Elohim who have not fulfilled their duty. Well, could these be humans that have judged Israel? That is one interpretation. We'll have to explore longer why I think that's not a possible interpretation, and that goes even to how Christ cites this passage when he is quizzed by the Pharisees. That's going to be for another time, not today. Let's stay on just the Elohim here and what they're up to. What they are in this passage is judged. Judged for doing something wrong. So look here. God stands in the divine assembly. This is how the ESV reads. The divine assembly. Remember, I said an assembly, a council, a group. So the divine council, this is really where this verse comes from. You're going to see it in a couple other places. If God is with his council, what are they up to? What are they doing? Is this concept in more places? Let's look around. Turn a few pages to Psalm 89. In Psalm 89, we really want to focus starting at verse 5. And the heavens will praise your wonders, O Lord, and the faithfulness also in the assembly of the saints. For who in the heavens can be compared to the Lord? Who among the sons of the mighty can be likened to the Lord? God is greatly to be feared in the assembly of the saints. For who in the heavens, greatly to be feared in the assembly of the saints, and to be held in reverence by those around him. Verse 8, O Lord of hosts, who is mighty like you, your faithfulness also surrounds you. Look up the screen, I've got the ESV. Who among the heavenly beings is like the Lord? So the New King James has a interpretation that includes saints. This is why we have focused this way and really looked away from this passage as supporting the idea. But the word behind it is the Elohim. Who among the heavenly beings is like the Lord? A God greatly to be feared in the council of the holy ones. Well, the holy ones, the set-apart ones, the holy ones is what's translated as saints. But is this us as saints, or is this a different population of holy ones? That's the question we're going to be developing a little bit further. We're going to turn now to a passage where God is going to look at King Ahab. Let's turn in 1 Kings. 1 Kings, we're jumping ahead way in Israel's timeline. We're past David and Solomon and all the good things that come from their setting up of God's kingdom. And we're now in 1 Kings chapter 22. We're a little bit past some of the adventures of Elijah and Elisha. But in 1 Kings 22, let's approach this. So there's judgment talk, and the prophet who is going to be called in order to talk to King Ahab is Micaiah. Let's look at, verse 15 is good. Then came the king, and the king said to him, Micaiah, shall we go to war against Ramoth-Gilead, or shall we refrain? So here's the question. I want to ask God, this is Ahab thinking, I want to ask God if we should go into battle or not, and I'm going to ask Micaiah what the Lord wants. Now, Ahab's not been a very good follower. You know anything about Ahab, he kind of takes advice and goes the other direction. And sometimes he tries to pay off prophet to get the message he wants. And then he doesn't listen to prophets, and he listens to Baal. He does not have a good track record. So let's keep looking and see what happens. So he talks and he says, I've got these problems. Verse 17, I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains as sheep that have no shepherd, and the Lord said, these have no master, let's each return to his house in peace. And the king, so they have, the nation has no leader. It's prophesying that the leader would die. And 18, the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, did I not tell you he would not prophesy good things, but only evil? See, he says the king's going to die. And this is where it gets interesting. Then Micaiah said, therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I've got more prophecy coming. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne. We're talking about thrones. And all the host of heaven standing by. A collection, an assembly of the host of heaven. We've had some verses about this with these same terms. And they were on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, he's talking to his assembly, his divine council, who will persuade Ahab to go up that he may fall at Ramoth-Gilead? Who is going to go from my assembly and go out and make the prophecy I have just sent through Micaiah? Who's going to go make that prophecy true? So we are given a glimpse into God's inner workings of how he's accomplishing his purpose. So one spoke out in this manner, and another spoke out in that manner. What do we have? We have a conversation. Hey, I've got an idea. We can get him to mess up by this plan. Hey, I've got another idea. We're going to go out and tell him this and set him up this way. And that's how he's going to fall. And then, 21, a spirit came forward, a spirit, that's one of the members of this divine council, a spirit came forward, one of the Elohim, and stood before the Lord and said, I will persuade him. And the Lord said, in what way will you persuade him? And he said, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all of his prophets. We're not talking about Micaiah here, we're talking about his non-Yahweh loyal prophets. And the Lord said, you shall persuade him. Go and prevail. Go out and do so. Therefore, look, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these prophets of yours, and the Lord has declared disaster against you. Let me summarize. Ahab says, well, what's going to happen? And he says, you're going to die in battle because the population is going to be scattered because they have no king. He said, that's no good. I don't want to hear about that battle outcome. And to make the word of the Lord come true, he says, you know what? You don't want to listen to me? I will let you listen to the lying spirit in your advice you seek among your direction. And this implies Ahab goes back and he talks to his prophets of Baal and whoever else is there. Hey, am I going to go win at Ramoth-Gilead? And what do they say as a bunch of yes men who don't have a clue of what's really going on? Sure you are. You're going to win, king. Go take the battle. That's the lying spirit. This